Hey, everybody. Fantastic. Glad that you could be here with James and myself. It is, as I said, going to be a fantastic time. Listen, there's all kinds of news out there, but the news points us to Jesus' coming. And man, that gives us a great hope, doesn't it, James?
Yes, it does.
And we got a lot to talk about today. Are you ready for this?
Yes, let's do it.
Are you sitting down? Okay, because here's what we got going. All right. We're going to talk about some of the lawlessness and liars that the Bible prophesies of the last days. Now, listen to this. Chicago gang packed, shoot any cop on sight. And then we have this coming out of a Bloomberg report that was paid for by Bloomberg, apparently, from what I understand. Trump may win the election on election night. It appears they're concerned by a landslide, but Biden will win after the mail-in votes are counted. I guess that's why we are hearing from Hillary Clinton, don't concede the election. And then we have this issue, or this bit of news, I wouldn't say issue, but over the Mideast, of course, there's the UAE and the Israeli peace covenant that's been entered into. But now, from what I understand, all kinds of Arab nations are wanting to enter into peace with Israel. And then the final thing I want to ask you about is this. Can you be saved if you don't love Israel? Because there's these a lot of internet chatter's been going on lately. People are saying, hey, you may have accepted Jesus, but if you don't love Israel, you're not going to be raptured. So we have a lot to talk about today, don't we?
What's wrong with people?
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
There you go.
Goodness.
So we're going to be there in just a minute. So let me ask you about the first thing. I want to talk a little bit about lawlessness and the days of Noah. And this article specific regarding Chicago. The FBI sent an intelligence alert to Chicago Police Department warning of a pact agreed to by several Chicago gangs to, get this, shoot on sight any cop that has a weapon drawn on any subject in public. And then the alert, let me read a little bit more, which mentions around 36 gangs, says members of these gang factions have been actively searching for and filming police officers in performance of their official duties. And this is a quote. The purpose of which is to catch on film an officer drawing their weapon on someone, shoot on sight of said officer in order to garner national media attention. That's a quote. The whole purpose, it's about propaganda. Kill a cop, make it propaganda in order to win our argument. You look at that, you go, you got to be kidding me. That's the reality of the world that we live in.
Look, this is the heart of the left right now in the United States of America. The heart of the left is we are not going to sit down and engage in an intelligent dialogue with you. We're not going to have a reasonable disagreement. We're not going to exercise the free speech that you continue to say that you're going to champion. The better thing to do is to cancel you. And we're going to cancel you any way we can. We're going to cancel you by snuffing out your life. We'll cancel you by compartmentalizing you and making you seem nominalized. We'll cancel you any way we want. And this is the beginning of this kind of mindset. This is exactly why I call things like this tyrannical, because what it leads to is it leads to the type of mechanism that drives what we're seeing right now with police officers. Let me explain something to you. This is not a civil rights issue. Okay, let me just say, civil rights is not the driving force that is pushing the anti-police sentiment in this country. If it was, then I think Senator Scott's bill that he had actually put out on the floor would be something they would have sat down and talked about. They would have looked at it and they would have said, hey, let's talk about police reform. Let's make some changes. That's not the issue here. The real issue that's at hand is an anger and a frustration that is produced within them own selves because of the fact that they have chosen to embrace the lie. They've chosen to embrace the enemy. And look, this is reality. Reality is they hate anything that is even remotely representative of God. And the sole function of a law enforcement officer in our nation today, and this is true, make no mistake about it, the sole function of a law enforcement officer today is to enforce laws that were designed to protect the citizens that are in that city, in that nation, in that wherever it is that they have jurisdiction over, whether it be at the federal level, the local level, or the state level. And the reality of it is these people hate that. They hate authority. They hate anything that remotely resembles authority. And so they're going to do anything that they can to come against that. And it's unfortunate because that is the destructive mechanism that they deploy. The Bible says it would happen. We shouldn't be surprised about it. But I also want to make a comment about this, Tom, because I've noticed this, and I don't like to read the comments a whole lot. It is kind of sad that there's a lot of people that write in the comments, James is too much of a loudmouth. I don't like listening to him and all that kind of thing. I get that, that happens because of my type of personality or whatever. But the reason why I'm a loudmouth and the reason why I tend to be pretty aggressive about these things, and the reason why I besides my personality and the fact that I'm from the Middle East and I'm a pastor and so on and so forth, the reason why I speak about these things is because shame on anybody who chooses not to speak against them. Shame on the people who stand in hypocrisy and say, oh, well, Jesus is coming, so it doesn't matter. Let the whole earth go to hell. That is not what the Bible tells us to do. The Bible tells us to be people who will stand for righteousness. The Bible tells us to be people who will speak up concerning these things, who will walk in boldness. Here's the reason why. Because Jesus Christ is coming back for the church. He's coming back for us. And you do not want to find yourself with your proverbial pants down, resting in your gluttonous type of mindset that says, oh, well, we're just not going to do anything. We're just going to sit here and feed ourselves and not get out there and do the work that God has called us to do. This is the problem that we continue to face. And by the way, I think it should be said, and make no mistake about it, I am a dispensationalist, okay? I believe pre-tribulational, premillennials, right down the line. I'm a hardcore defender of all of those things. But let me just simply say this. I'm not a dominionist. I never will be a dominionist. But why aren't we going out of our way to stand up for things in the kingdom, especially when we have that liberty afforded to us in this nation? Christians have an obligation to interact in this great republic that we might take a stand concerning these things.
Yeah. Amen. I couldn't say it any better. I look at this. We are called to be salt and light. We're called to occupy until he comes. And when I read comments too, the same comments, and you see these things and think, look, this is a fight. If you're going to comment about the battle that we are in and step up to the plate. We are supposed to fight until the end. We are supposed to stand up for what is right and not just say, well, Jesus is coming, let's just lay down and make fun of each other or not go to church or all these other different things. Look, we are in a fight. We got to stand up. I was talking to a friend of mine last night. He's a sheriff, a local sheriff, and he was saying, look, the other officers with him, the other sheriff and the other police officers in our community from the local PD are just beaten down just from what they hear on the media. It's just gotten everybody just wanting to resign. But I believe this is what the left wants to happen. They want the people to resign, the officers to resign. They want to bring in a whole different type of police officer. But, James, correct me if I'm wrong on this number, but I think it's like 80% of the black community does not want less police. They want the same amount, if not more. So when we hear about talking of defunding the police, I don't think it's coming from the black community. I think it's coming from these radical leftists who want to fundamentally change America into just an absolute disaster, complete chaos, so they can bring in all the changes that they want to bring, because out of the chaos, they can bring the changes that they want.
It's absolutely right. I mean, think about this. Did you ever think you would see the day where some guy locked in his basement that doesn't have half his memory intact would stand as a Trojan horse for his wicked, satanically inspired party to actually say, hey, everything's okay. You know what? Let's defund the police and let's take that money and let's give it to people who are murdering 3,000 babies a day. 3,000 a day, 1,500 of which are black babies for all you social justice warriors.
Yeah.
Think about that. Why aren't we standing up with that? Why aren't we talking about that? Why aren't we talking about this crazy bill that got passed a few days ago in the state of California? I mean, you talk about the nonsense of from now on, pedophiles now won't be committing felonies. It won't be a felony when they commit their pedophilic acts. I mean, think about that. 10 years. Yeah. If you listen to this, if you're 24 and you rape a 14-year-old, you're not going to be charged with the felony and you won't have to be a registrant. I mean, that's really what the essence of these things are. Christians lay down and they don't speak up concerning these things, and it's time we end that nonsense.
Yeah. So I look at these things. You had mentioned not just the immorality, but also you mentioned somebody running for president that can't put together a sentence on his own. And you look at this, you go, just think back to 2016. Would that have been possible ever in the history of America? No, but there's an agenda that is coming. Now, and along these lines, with this, the Democrat pollsters have noticed that their numbers have been slipping and Trump's have been climbing, and they're pretty confident it's because of these riots. So here's this article. After cheering BLM and ignoring riots for weeks, Democrats finally speak out against far-left violence and blame Trump. And you look at this and you go, it's just amazing how this whole thing is going. When Trump's not allowed to enter into any of these cities to help quench the violence. We watch what's happening up in Portland, Oregon. It's like unbelievable. I can't believe that is actually happening here in America. But Portland, Seattle, and we've talked about these cities before, but now the only reason they're getting in the game is because the numbers are dropping on Joe Biden.
It's ridiculous. It's so satanically inspired, it's not even funny. Why doesn't everybody just stop putting down the president when it comes to this type of a thing? I mean, it's ridiculous. Look, the nonsense in Wisconsin went on day after day after day after day. The president finally said, come on, please give me a call. And then finally, the mayor of the city went ahead and gave him a call and said, look, bring in your troops. We need it. We need these guys to come in. He ended it in literally, I think, 3 hours. 3 hours. It's ended. It's gone. Law and order is back into play. I mean, the president has been kicking and screaming and kicking and screaming. And if this has been such a big deal to the Democrats, and if they, were the type of people that were like, oh my gosh, this is horrible, we shouldn't be doing this, and this is right. I watched the Democratic National Convention. I had to take like 18 showers after watching it because I felt so dirty, but I watched it. Not a single word, not one word from a single person condemned the violence or even mentioned it for that matter. As a matter of fact, what was mentioned was the right to protest, the blah, 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 all that nonsense.
Yeah, because it was all promoted as being peaceful protests while buildings are burning down behind the anchormen that are out there on the field. Reporting on these things. You look at this and you go, it's just unbelievable, which leads me to something else. So Joe Biden, right? Bloomberg funded report. Trump may win election night, but Joe Biden will win days later due to mail-in votes. You can get this, I think this was from Gatestone. And basically it goes on to say that we believe on election night we are going to see Donald Trump in a stronger position than reality actually is, and that he's going to have an incredible victory on election night. But after the mail-in votes come in other words, we're going to extend this and have our lawyers not be able to call it, and they're going to count and count and count and count. I look at this and I go, man, they are just setting up everybody to let us all know if you're looking at it objectively, look, they want to steal the election. I mean, that's the way I look at this and manipulate everything the way they possibly can. But they're also preparing the masses of people to say, wait, we can't call it on election night. We can't call it the next day. Everybody needs to just be patient. That's the bill of goods that we're being sold on this. And I'm thinking we are being lied to and manipulated. And unfortunately, too many people believe this stuff.
Listen, praise God that the incumbency sits with President Trump. because if we have any chance of being able to win or see something reasonable take place with respect to all of this, it's going to be based on the fact that we have somebody in an advantageous position that's going to be really settled to take a stand with these issues and to fight for righteousness, right? This is crazy. Everybody knows that Trump is going to win by a mile. Everybody knows that. And by the way, we should all be thinking as though he's going to lose. We should all be thinking as though he's going to lose, so that everybody goes out to the polls and everybody votes, and more people on a historic level vote than anybody else in the past, so that even if these mail-in ballots, supposed mail-in ballots that are going to come in that are going to make a difference do come in, that it won't make a difference because it's overwhelming. But the bottom line is this. The bottom line is you have satanically inspired individuals in very high influential places that are doing everything they can to take away the precedent that has been set in this country for anti-abortion and anti-anything else that is hatred towards God.
Yeah. So I look at this, we need to be in the fight, and I don't mean physical fight. It is a spiritual battle that we are in, and we need to be involved politically. There's so many pastors out there that just say, just don't be involved politically. I say, look at this world. We are fighting against spiritual forces, but the reality of it is they're working through their minions here on this planet, and we have the opportunity to be able to vote and get involved and speak out like you and I are speaking out and others are speaking out. We need to do that, and troops need to be motivated in the spiritual world. But man, get out and vote. Listen, in California alone, James, you probably know the exact numbers, but in California alone, if the registered evangelical voters would get out and actually vote and vote righteousness, California would turn red overnight.
In a heartbeat and by a long shot, by a huge amount. There are 14 million people in California that are in a position to be able to vote, that have not registered to vote, that call themselves evangelicals. Now you think about that. If half that number were to actually do that, if half that number were to register and were to actually be active and vote for the things that are right, California would be a wrap.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even be a question.
Yeah, it would. And I'm thinking instead, half the evangelicals I know just sit around and complain, but they won't get involved. They won't want to open up their churches, won't even go to church, let alone get out there and vote, but just complain about everything that's going on. It's time to stop complaining. Shut your mouth and get involved, and let's move forward. This is the world that we live in, and Jesus may come tomorrow. We may get called home tomorrow. But what if we're not called home for 30 more years? We don't know the day or the hour. We don't know what God's going to do.
What if we're called home in 10 minutes?
Yeah.
I want to be caught standing up for the right things.
Amen.
I want to be caught doing my Father's business.
Amen.
I don't want to be the guy that says, "Oh, I buried my talent because I was fearful, Lord. You're a tough man," and all this kind of, and I didn't really want to do anything. And I that's ridiculous. Yeah. It's absurd.
I don't want to be caught burying my talents and sitting around complaining about those others who are out there doing things.
That's right. There's a lot of that going on too.
There seems to be more of that. I mean, I know a lot of shots are getting fired at you and Jack and myself and Tim and others. And you go, Rob McCoy, obviously. Look, get involved. Okay, last thing. It's regarding the UAE and Israel peace pact. This article talks about Kushner putting together more opportunities for peace with Israel. And we've talked a little bit about this, but I find it fascinating because it shows to me just how close we are to the day of the Lord calling us home. After accompanying an Israeli delegation to the UAE for historic normalization talks, White House advisor Jared Kushner set off on a tour to other Gulf capitals on Tuesday looking for more Arab support. Israel exchanged embassies with neighbors Egypt and Jordan under peace deals decades ago, but until now, all other Arab states had demanded it first cede more land to the Palestinians. In remarks reported by the UAE state agency, WAM, Kushner suggested other Arab states could follow quickly. Asked when the next would normalize ties with Israel, he was quoted as saying, "Let's hope it's months." Kushner later flew to Bahrain and then to Saudi Arabia and is expected to also visit Qatar. We're watching this. I think you mentioned it last time. It's like everybody wants to make peace with Israel all of a sudden. It's just amazing. I'd say it's amazing the days we live in. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's one of the things that we talked about. If you remember, when we talked about the whole idea of the UAE doing what we're doing, I had mentioned this before. I said Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed in no way would ever be able to have put this peace treaty together or even agreed to it had he not got permission from the royal family in Saudi Arabia. So we know that this is the case. We know Saudi Arabia for sure would have conceded to this only because they are very likely seeking to enter into some kind of a formal peace treaty. It's very, very obvious. I'm not surprised about Bahrain. Qatar is a little surprising to me, but when you think about the implications of what could happen even there, it's very, 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 very unique. But they're jumping in on the bandwagon. The one thing that they all have in common, which is actually quite interesting, is their hatred for Iran, right? And so that kind of creates a bit of a, I guess for lack of a better term, a buffer when they make alliances with Israel, simply because of the economic advantage that would provide for them. It strengthens OPEC's position, which is also another very interesting thing with respect to how oil is handled in relation to Iran and particularly with Russia, which of course is going to make for a big fat political mess. And what's really interesting, we read about this in Ezekiel 38 and 39, we know about what's going to happen, right? We know that Russia is going to lead a group, or this leader of Russia is going to lead a group. He's going to lead Russia. He's going to lead Turkey. We know we're talking about Iran. We're talking about Libya. We're talking about the Sudan. And we know that these guys are going to all come against Israel. And there's going to be other states as well that are going to be coming against Israel. And when they come against Israel, their sole purpose in coming against Israel is going to be basically for the loot. Mm-hmm. They're going to come after Israel because of the riches that they have developed. And it's interesting because all indicators that we get from Ezekiel chapter 30 and 39 is that Israel's going to be completely surprised, because it would seem as though their relationship with at least Russia, for at the bare minimum, is going to be very, very good. And so in the midst of it, it's going to be a surprise. It's going to be like, hey, why are you coming to take our stuff? We have a good relationship. And what is not a surprise, especially now as we're watching all these peace treaties begin to formulate, is the fact that there will be nations that will object. Now, they're going to object, but what's unique about this is they're not going to jump in defense, in the sense of they're not going to put their money where their mouth is and actually fight this battle, but they are going to object. And it's interesting how Egypt is not mentioned in this. We know that Jordan is not mentioned in this. These are both nations that had peace treaties established with them. Egypt in 1979, I want to think, and Jordan probably 94.
94, yeah, those are both right. Yep.
And so, now in 25 years later, really 26 years later, we get this new peace treaty that comes about, and it's no surprise. But what is also very interesting is these nations will object. Saudi Arabia for sure is going to object. We know that the Gulf states that surround Saudi Arabia is going to object, and we know that Egypt is going to be a friend anyway of Israel because of the stance that God takes concerning Egypt in the last days. So none of this stuff should actually be a surprise. And what's even more interesting is the fact that these nations that object are not going to get in the war, like I had mentioned earlier. They're not going to actually put their troops there, but God is going to come in and he's going to also intervene. So when we look at the compilation of nations that are seeking to come in on this treaty, we could have predicted. I mean, literally, we said that something like this would happen. It's not a surprise, but the way it's happening, you can't make this stuff up. Yeah. It's incredible. And the speed by which it's happening, it's incredible. And I would not be surprised if Bahrain was the next, and Saudi Arabia, maybe even before Qatar will be next. But if it's not, it still is not a surprise. I think they're all going to join in.
I do too. Hey, we're going to talk about the gas, the energy that Turkey is now going to have access to, or does have access to, but it's going to start developing. We're going to talk about that today. We ran out of time. So I'm going to make that the big issue next week, because that is, I believe, is going to play a huge part in what is coming biblically regarding the Ezekiel 38-39 war, because Israel also has their energy and they're already starting to supply the other nations. Turkey's, we'll talk about that. That to me is extremely exciting, because that hook is going to pull Russia, Turkey, and Iran into Israel. But also, James, so that's next week. I promise everybody I'll bring it up next week with you. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. But right now, I was thinking of something else. Egypt, Isaiah chapter 17, is very clear. Because of their oppressors, Egypt turns to the Lord in the last days. So just some of the things that you were saying. Listen, Egypt is not just going to be friendly with Israel. They're going to be worshiping the Lord of Israel when that day comes. We live in exciting times, but all of this, James tells me, these things are happening, as you mentioned, so fast. And they're happening faster and faster and faster. We better be ready, and we need the Lord Jesus Christ. James, we're out of time. Real quick, people can follow you how?
You can follow me on Instagram, James Cadiz, at James Cadiz. You can go to our YouTube page, the church's YouTube page, which is Calvary Chapel Signal Hill, or you can follow the church at CC Signal Hill on all the social media platforms. That's where we're available. So please subscribe, join, follow.
Hey, make sure you do. Listen, James has updates every single day. I've got 4 now a week. I expect to have 5 pretty soon per week. James has them every day. They're fantastic. I love watching them. By the way, everybody, I'm not going to tell you, I have a special guest this Sunday night. It's going to be really exciting. I'm not going to tell you right now who it is, but let me tell you, it's going to be rocking and rolling, and it will be high energy too. But listen, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this YouTube channel also. Just click subscribe. It is absolutely free, and also my Facebook. We will keep you updated between James and myself. We promise we will keep you updated on things. And let's go, folks. Let's get involved in the fight. It is a spiritual fight that we are in. Thank you, everybody, for watching. God bless. James, be talking to you real soon.
Yes, sir. See you in a bit.
Okay.